Joel, you're up to the plate.
Come on, okay.
You're up. We are here now to discuss proposed zoning bylaw amendment for historic structures, preservation district, and I'm just trying to see how to frame this. Yeah, grab a seat. Sure. The selectmen asked us to take a look at drafting this amendment, and this represents the draft, which we're going to go through as a board, and then based on comments that we get tonight, issue a clean copy for people to take a look at and comment on. I think that's our agenda for this evening.
Actually, there was talk last week or last time we met of maybe the board taking another crack at it one day next week.
I think we're going to have to. I think we'll have to. I think that's when we do between now and then do revisions and then review the clean copy next week. Just to set the table, what we're doing here is trying to craft a bylaw based on the ARD model, AARD, which is the active adult residential overlay district. And that was a fairly involved bylaw. This one, because there are multiple uses, not just residential uses possible, gets us involved in other issues as well as the issues developed in the ARD. And what we're considering doing is there are currently 3 parcels that are up for consideration to be included in this district. There's a parcel that contains the old library. That's about an acre. There's a parcel that contains the Josiah Smith Tavern. And then the third parcel is for the Fisk Law Office. 2 of those parcels have fairly limited uses, in fact, single uses with low occupancy. The library and the law office. The third parcel is a mixed-use parcel with considerably greater impact. So one of the things we try to do here is develop a scenario where for smaller parcels that would be included in this district now or perhaps in the future, that full concept plan development and presentation of that plan to town meeting would be waived in favor of just designation at town meeting and the special permit review process without the concept plan phase. So small projects don't require the concept plan, larger projects do. And the other thing here is the notion that this is a very, like the ARD, a very limited overlay district, applicable to just a few parcels in town that meet the qualifying standards, not a blanket potential overlay district for whole areas of the town. So those are some of the parameters that we've been looking at. And is there anything you'd like to add to that synopsis, Joel?
Yes, well, actually, there are 2 of the items there I see differently, actually. Because if you remember, I originally had suggested an overlay district, and your your reaction was that you didn't want a limited applicability overlay district, and you came up with this ARD-like concept.
Yeah.
So it's actually not an overlay district. It creates a more flexible kind of development that would be available potentially in the 3 named residential districts and the business B district. And that's how you wrote it originally. We actually didn't change that. So, and you'd mentioned that 3 parcels would be eligible. I think you have mean, clearly, everybody has 3 parcels in mind, but the way it's written, other parcels could be eligible.
As
And-
long as they met the standards.
Exactly, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not
It's limited,
overly-
I say currently.
currently the thinking is, and as we go through it, there's some policy choices to be made, and, we're not making them, we, the town council, we put them out there, and obviously it's for the planning board to recommend and ultimately town meeting to decide. There are a couple of big policy swing issues there that'll come up as we go through this, but
Yeah.
in any event, I think everybody understands that right now the thinking is those 3 parcels.
Right. And I think one of the ideas here is that you don't want to have somebody petition to be included in this district who happens to live next door to you in an old house and wants to open a sub shop, in a residential district. The idea is to focus on specific properties that meet specific criteria. And expansion under that rubric could include, if the town ever does it, purchase of case buildings, for example, which are currently in a residential zone, but whose uses might not be suitable for all the buildings for residential conversion. So it could be expanded to include other buildings like that if the town chose to do so.
Well, there again, that gets into, I think, a discussion that may or may not occur depending on how the other planning board members feel, but over the issue of whether it's limited to publicly owned buildings or any building. So theoretically, the Case Estate building, which is currently owned by Harvard, not that they're, I don't think, interested in getting into the business of opening a restaurant or sub shop or whatever. The Case Estates, but some private party perhaps. And of course, ultimately, it all has to run through the planning board by special permit, so it's not like somebody can go to a town meeting. But it'll all become clear as we go through it. But obviously, that's a major discussion point, because there was at least one email to you, which I got copied from Michael Harity, who advocates in favor of it including privately owned buildings. So anyway, it's a discussion point.
I got to tell you, if that
Your opinion's clear.
we're not going to propose it if that's the case. Period.
All right, as I said, that's probably one of the bigger swing points, if you will.
Yeah, I just think that's a non-starter.
Okay, well, you all are going to present this.
Right. Okay, let's go through
Should we
it.
go through it? And I noticed right in the title, by the way, we have a typo, so we'll fix that. Word development.
And do you want to explain why you want to call it a development district?
Well, yes, thank you. So it's not, as I was alluding actually to in my comments back to Al, so the idea is it's not a district. So within 4 existing zoning districts, the 3 named residence districts and the business B, within those 4 districts, somebody can apply through the process that we discuss here, can apply to have one of these developments. So in a sense, it's in the nature of a use. The use being a mixed use that's occurring in a historically significant building or characterized. But it's a reuse of an old building, and because it will be, it could be a hybrid of uses, or it could be, if you want to be allowed use of a special permit, we just refer to it as a development. So that's the concept. It's a specific kind of development. It's meant to be flexible zoning. The this pattern, if you will, of going to town meeting for larger projects and the planning board for special permit is a frequently used pattern in a number of communities for larger or smaller but mixed-use development projects. So they're allowed in certain parts of town. Lincoln has it, Burlington has it, maybe a couple of nearby communities. So you think of it in terms of a development. So, and by the way, just to explain what we're seeing here, this begins with a draft that Al sent us, and then we made all of the changes you see in red It looks like you have the
So
same
yours
color
are in
scheme.
blue.
And then yours are blue, I think.
No.
They have a different scheme. Mine looks like yours.
So Joel, per
Look at this.
our discussion
Yeah.
today, I gave the board 2 comments. One is the one you're referring to where KMP provided edits on the first draft that Al prepared. That for the board is where in the header it says HSPD draft number 2.
Okay.
And then the second document entitled HSPD draft number 3 is where Al provided comments back on your draft.
Okay.
And I sent you that last night.
Yes, and I've looked at it. So then looking at what you all are looking at, Al, as you were starting to say, so our comments are in that lightish blue-gray, and then Al's comments are in red. So the first paragraph, all we've done really is just put wordsmithing, if you will, describing what development will be. The second paragraph, you go all the way to the end, Al has said in red, should this paragraph be moved to the permitted use section? We agree completely, so we'll move that.
Doesn't this need a 2/3 vote at town meeting?
Okay, yeah, now let's get into the substance here of this second paragraph. It does not. So here's, well,
The ARD does.
well, evidently that was the choice. So here's how it works. So in a sense, it goes back to the back and forth we just had. So there's no zoning change that's occurring under the zoning bylaw. You would be allowing for a mixed-use development in one of these districts, provided that it meets all of these criteria, provided that it gets a special permit. But it first requires a concept plan approval by town meeting.
So a
it's-
major project.
For major projects, thank you. I'm going to have to spend some time focusing on what distinguishes major from minor. But so all that is an approval by town meeting. It's not actually a rezoning, because we're not changing the zoning districts. The 4 districts in which it's possible are going to be as mapped. And the ultimate decision will be by special permit of the planning board. But because of the unusual nature of this type of project, it's presented to town meeting for concept plan approval. And and it can be, and I'm not.
So when does it turn into a? Well, why does the ARD require 2/3 then?
Because that's how you drafted it. It didn't have to.
Wait, so we could draft this the same way. We could make this 2/3.
It could be 2/3. Yeah, I just put majority
Oh,
question mark. I'm
okay.
just letting you know
I'd rather
there's a
have-
choice.
I'd personally rather have 2/3. I'd like to have, this be really supported by town meeting. Personally, that's my personal feeling. The other members might disagree with me on that, but.
Yeah, and I again have no view. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
It didn't have to be 2/3.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So going to the second line, major ASPD projects with a total occupancy of 30 or greater. So that KDL1 is a comment of ours. We need to define what's meant by total occupancy. So can we spend a couple minutes on that now?
The total number of people commonly occupying the uses, the sum total of uses if it's a mixed-use project, or the use if it's a single-use project.
So when you say commonly, if it's retail, it does not include the patrons? It only includes
It would have to. I mean, commonly using or occupying the use. So, for instance, for a restaurant, occupants would have to include the total number of occupants in the restaurant. Customers.
I think restaurants are the one that's easiest, but I agree, you get into problems with retail, you get into, not so much problem, but
Office use.
The
Office
largest,
use is straightforward.
office use, I mean, it really depends how it's laid out. I guess you want to see a layout. Residence, 3 units are the maximum. Because you have to really stuff goes
What
through.
about the occupancy that you usually see that's related to fire safety?
Yeah, that's one.
In zoning.
Does it make sense just to tie it to that?
You can do it, you can tie it to the state building code and or to an actual occupancy count for egress, whichever is greater.
Yeah.
That would work.
Is that in the fire code?
It's a state building
It's a
code.
statement.
The occupancy count for egress? I guess.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter on egress and how to count egress units and so forth. There's a table of square footages associated.
So,
with
so if you had, go back to retail, because I think that's a tough one. So if you have, whatever, 4,000 square feet of retail, that table's going to tell us what the occupancy is.
Yep. It tells you what the occupancy is for fire egress, which is a fairly common number to calculate. For office building uses for 100 square feet per person, for example. But sometimes certain offices have higher actual occupancies than the standard, so you want to do it both ways, either by projected actual occupancy or by occupancy according to the state building code, whichever is greater.
Well, we will look at that, and we'll come back with some options, some ways to calculate occupancy.
So my question is, how'd you come up with 30?
You don't want it to be the trigger to be so small that you're dragging small projects through the whole concept plan thing.
Right.
On the other hand, at some point, it gets to have a real impact on what happens in the town center, which is where this site happens to be located, two of them.
So were you
All
thinking
three.
like 30 cars?
I was thinking, yeah, maybe 30 people would translate into maybe 15, 20 cars. That would then have an impact on the parking, and that would have an impact on traffic, or begin to. So I was just trying to get to a number that seemed reasonable. It could be 50, it could be, I don't think it would want to be much less than 30.
No, anything didn't go either direction.
Yeah, it's fine with me. It could be, we could call it 50. Again, the email from Michael you just referenced, he was suggesting 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought,
Number, yeah.
that's, everything becomes a major project.
And 30 may be fine, I was just wondering.
And just trying to picture,
Yeah, right.
how things function.
So we're going to stay with 30 for now, or?
You guys,
Well,
It seems reasonable. You're thinking of bumping it up, Steve?
well, let me ask you this. For the old library, which we consider by itself, is that going to be a minor project then? Okay.
would have to be. There are 3 housing units.
Yeah.
With a total of 1, 2, 3, 4,
And
6, 7 units.
I guess then the question is, well, yeah, okay, then the tavern would definitely be over 30 because the restaurant's 80.
Fiscal office is no more than 6.
Right, but if the tavern didn't include a restaurant, then it may not be over 30, but,
Well,
I mean, that is probably reasonable.
there are some, there's so many variants flying around now in town. Huh?
Can I just ask about the Josiah Smith Tavern with the current use? So if this went to town meeting and it was approved, would that limit, for example, the Women's Community League that can have now a limit of 49 people attend there? Would that impact that, or?
Well, that's a pre-existing use, so if nothing happened, my guess is that just things would just stay the way they are.
But just to be clear, all we're talking about here is what bumps it up to be a major project that requires that it go to town meeting. It's not imposing a limit of 30, it's just saying once you pass an occupancy of 30, it's a project that town meeting has to approve
So if it's a pre-existing use, it would not be part of this?
Yes, it would.
It would be.
Well, if nothing happened to the tavern,
Because nothing's proposed, right, for this town meeting?
nothing's proposed at this
Right,
town meeting,
okay.
so
So
it would just, it just stays the way it is. It's as is,
So it wouldn't be impacted by this that we're talking about
No.
now?
Right.
not at all.
I'm sorry, I thought that if it were redeveloped.
Okay.
And if it's a space that doesn't have a daily function, it has an occasional function, such as a meeting, such as that, would that still trigger it?
Again, the
Well, no,
question,
if it was in fact developed and stuff, but it wasn't, I'm
It
trying
doesn't
to figure
occupy
that
all
out.
the time, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
I think you go by the maximum occupancy, either determined by the formula in the state building code or by actual projected occupancy. The most people at any time, it's kind of like our view of lighting fixtures.
Right.
Assume you have them all on at once, because that's the maximum impact. That's the way I would view it.
So that means the answer to Dave's question is yes. In
Yes.
other words, if it's a space that's occupied once a week by 150 people, that's the number, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that's the way I would do it. Because there's the impact.
It's the maximum. I have a question while we're still in that paragraph. Where is the fiscal office?
It's been
On Linwood?
right there.
On Linwood?
Yeah, it's right in the corner.
Okay, well, that's single-family residence district D, which we didn't include.
Is it G or C?
This is D.
No, we need to add D.
That's the term.
Yeah, okay, we need to add D.
But it did make me think, I mean, it's the only reason you're including residential districts because of the fiscal office and possibly the case house in the future, or?
No, what about, we can talk about possible additions down the road. What about the train station on the old tracks? The old B&M tracks that's
Right.
sort of not really used. That's currently a state-owned piece of property.
Right.
What happens if that becomes something else? What about, this is a stretch, but the concrete fire station on North Avenue, if anybody
Right.
ever used that for anything besides, it's in the middle of a residential district. Parking would be a colossal problem in that building, but just thinking,
It's a manageable problem.
well, then it would never happen, but currently it's just standing there.
It'll
so-
fall down before it gets used.
It'll never fall down.
Really?
I guess this is by now about 9,000 PSI concrete.
And also the building to the entrance of Broken Stone, is that included in this? The house thing?
That's privately owned.
Mhm. Okay.
That's owned by Boston Properties.
So if they were to give it to the town or something, then it could fall.
Yeah, that would qualify if they gave it to the town.
But it's already in district business B, so.
So
But
do
you
I.
could make it a residence again, Steve.
Right, right. But I guess what I was getting at is there any reason you'd want to limit it more and just say this is district B and single-family residence D for now, so that this whole public-private thing doesn't become as much of an issue if it were to?
I don't. It doesn't matter to me at this point.
The other two properties are fully in business B.
Yeah.
The other ones are fully business B. Is there anything else in business A that could possibly be restored?
I keep hoping that case land's going to get bought.
Right, of course, that's an A. That's in residence A. So, I mean, the good thing about including all this is that you wouldn't have to come back and change it. I just don't know if there's any downside.
Isn't the concept to keep it as flexible as possible on the one hand, and then on qualifications, make it obviously a little more rigid in terms of what the use is going to be, what the qualifications
if you're going to do that, then why not include business A and any of these others? Why are you limiting it to the 4 residents and that one business? Just because you know about properties around it.
Yeah. Again,
Could it be anywhere in town and not even state which districts they're in?
As a zoning principle, could.
good. And that would be okay with me too.
Well, there's the R, business district, A, commercial district, which is a little lower, multiple dwelling. What's commercial? That's commercial, I don't know what that is. Oh, that's overseas. So, I don't know, I don't know if there's any advantage in limiting it at all, or just.
Whatever people think, I don't really have a preference one way or the other. Guys, should we limit it to specific zones and just have it be a generally
Well,
applicable when it's approved by town meeting?
I guess it partially does relate to the public and private. Is there any reason that we can't, or is there some downside that just limiting it to publicly owned, as Al has requested, which makes sense, that could be a problem?
Okay, there are 2 elements to that. So one, as I said, is the pure policy decision, if you will. There's a slight nagging zoning issue, let me articulate it. It doesn't run me too much, but by way of example, when we talk about when towns first started zoning for telecommunications towers through the last couple of years. But, so the Telecommunications Act was amended by Congress in 1996. And the cell tower proliferation began in the late 90s. The community suddenly realized these things could go anywhere in town. So communities started to zone to say, and you know, the overriding federal law basically said you had to allow wherever there was a need for them. So communities started to plan around them, and what some communities did was they said, fine, let's allow them only on town-owned land, so we can control them through as owners. Oh, and by the way, we'll get the income. And so some towns said any town-owned land, and the Attorney General properly disapproved those bylaws because they said that you could amend the town's zoning by the town acquiring a new parcel of land. So town meeting votes on May 5th, 2012, say town-owned land, and so you know it's an identifiable pool of 38 properties. But then the next week, the town buys 2 parcels of land, and the 38 just went up to 40. And so effectively, just the ownership, the change in ownership of that parcel of land expanded the zoning map, if you will, for what was eligible. So, I mean, that was an illustration of something that had come up in other instances where when you zone by ownership, you potentially run afoul of invisibly of unintended consequences of other zoning principles. So, this is just the thought process I've been going through since this was first proposed. So the question is, do we run into danger if we make this available only to publicly owned properties? And I think the answer is no, through this analysis. And that is that we're saying it's a use that can occur in any of these districts. So we're not defining the district that way. So that's, it's the main branch, if you will, of which I find comfort, and that is that we're not changing the shape of the zoning district based on whether it's public or private. The zoning districts, whether it's all of them or just the 4 that we've named, are going to remain unchanged. So the only question is, where can this use be developed? And for that, one of the criteria is whether it's public or private. And whether the property is public or private. And so that doesn't change the zoning map. And I think I think basically it saves us. And the fact that the parcel, a parcel question can become eligible by public acquisition, the property owner selling it to the public. What it does mean is that a private property owner can't avail him or herself of this zoning mechanism, zoning tool. And the question is that inherently unfair? Well, that wouldn't violate a zoning principle, it would be more of a substantive process kind of issue. And I think the Attorney General would say that that's too fact-specific an inquiry for them on which to base disapproval, but they might put out a caution saying, at some point, your bylaw might be challenged by the person who says, hey, I've got the perfect 150-year-old house, I've been trying to unload it, trying to sell it for 2 years, I wouldn't buy it, but it would be a perfect for your use, restaurant, or whatever.
Or college.
That's a different kettle of fish.
Or bed and breakfast.
They could do that.
They could do that.
Through the Dover.
Absolutely. This wouldn't affect that at all.
So,
But if you were in that neighborhood, would you want a restaurant next to you?
well, then that, yeah, I mean, those become special permit. What's that?
Well,
It's good.
I haven't heard Suzak on that.
You have to vote on the chef.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the danger of having it open to residential
Right.
streets or possibly private. But the other concern is that what about in the case where it starts out as public and as we're talking about, then it's sold to a private developer and then becomes private condominiums. How does this whole public-private thing?
Well, then the town, as an owner, soon to become a former owner, restricts it through, first of all, it'll be restricted through your special permit conditions, but then the town as an owner imposes restrictions that would go beyond what would be beyond your authority. We can impose all kinds of restrictions. An owner conveying land can impose whatever restrictions they want. If the buyer doesn't like it, they won't buy. But when you convey property, as long as they're not illegal, of course, there used to be lots of illegal restrictions. But so as an owner, the town can impose.
Not only that, but there's a provision for right of first refusal.
Right, which I'm thinking more what happens when this, the HSPD, it started out as public, is now entirely private, which will be the case. For example, with the old library, is that creating some potential problem?
Well, it becomes, I mean, again, that's for you to sort out. It becomes 3 privately owned condominiums. Meanwhile, the structure is fully protected by a historic preservation restriction. I don't know what other kinds of restrictions may be imposed on it, but you've got the envelope secure. What else can they do?
Change use.
Well, you could restrict that.
Well, it's in
So, in that kind of a situation,
I see it would have to come back. Well, that's a good point.
in that kind of situation, as the seller, we could also request a sort of a bond, like a fund, to be able to maintain the exterior of the property, of the structure. That there'd be deposits made so that when it was time to repoint the brick, when it was time to repair a roof or whatever, paint the window frames, that there was a fund there that would be used for that. Would that be correct? Since part of the intent here is to preserve that structure and to create a use so that it will afford to be preserved.
There you just get into marketability considerations, whether it's the developer, and whether you're talking to the developer who's going to be proposing the development, or ultimately to the buyers, if you're talking to the buyers, whether they're simply going to say that's an owner's condition. But I mean, frankly, you run into those kinds of issues anytime you
I can understand
historic preservation. But
just to bring it down to earth, in this case, we're talking about, again, right now, we're just talking about these particular properties. And I agree, it's a valid general point, but these are going to be condominium units. So there's going to be a condominium association with a master deed, condominium rules and regulations, a preservation restriction, and one of the state requirements is that the condominium association keep a replacement reserve which is adequate for maintaining the building. So it's similar to art. So they are required to keep the building under the terms of the preservation restriction and under the terms of the special permit as a condominium. So it's almost, at least with respect to the tavern and old library, it's already in there by dint of the ownership structure. Now, it could be a different ownership structure, and that would be a different kettle of fish. And so I think looking at possible sites down the road might be something that we'd have to take a look at.
And you'll be seeing it through your special permit process. I mean, through the zoning bylaw, I think there's so many variations we can address. We get to look at those issues when they come in with the special permit application.
Could the planning board put that in our rules and regulations about somehow negotiating replacement reserves for projects that go out of town hands
you could put it in guidelines, but just to let people know that we'll be looking for that. There'll be some stewardship plans made.
Guidelines. In the bylaw guidelines, or
No, just guidelines that the planning board would develop, so that some applicant coming before you consider these kinds of projects would know you have historic preservation guidelines, and here's what you'll be looking for. And I mean, they're nice because that way an applicant knows what you're looking for. They're not binding on anybody, but they know what to expect coming in.
okay.
So what are we doing about zoning districts? Are we just adding single-family residence D for now, or are we eliminating all of them and making them town?
Does it matter that the language in the warrant only specified the 3 residential districts?
That's a good point.
That's already gone out.
Yes.
It didn't even mention the business district?
Business
It's
A?
A.
Or, no, B?
Business B, but not A.
Well, the problem is that D is the one that has the fiscal office.
Yeah. So, will the moderator find it to be, so now it's strictly a scope of the warrant issue. Will the moderator find it to be outside of the scope to expand the applicability of this to another residential
Well,
district?
if we're going to go with the other direction, that it's wide open, then we could remove the residential districts, and it would, and the
But
business
you're still
districts.
expanding.
Well, yeah, that I think would be problematic. I think,
Because you're taking that limitation away.
yeah, so you're making it apply town-wide, so I think the moderator said, well, wait, people looked at this and saw it was only.
We just do business district for now?
No, we
Well,
actually have to.
the only thing to do would be to add
Okay.
request to add it
That's
at town meeting, and that would have to be
Yeah.
agreed to.
Well, I mean, we could put it in the draft bylaw, and I mean, the way we're approaching this is we're aiming to have, by the time your legal ad is published, to have a final draft, and then it'll get tinkered with. Basically, when it comes to town meeting, there'll be a handout that'll be verbatim the bylaw that the planning board is recommending. And so the warrant article, as I wrote it, we talked about it briefly last time I was here, doesn't hamstring us too much, but Joe does point out one of the ways in which it's quite specific is it specifies the district. So it would be a decision for the moderator. So here's how it works. The moderator looks at the warrant article and said, all right, people reading the warrant article saw that this new use or district is being created and it can be used in these 4 districts in town. Are people unfairly going to have been surprised to have found out that you're also going to be able to do this in the residential district D?
Well,
I don't think we can
I gotta say, we
put it in and run
gotta,
it.
the fiscal office has to be in this. It
Well,
has
of course,
to
you
be.
could always add it the next time.
No, it has to be
Can we
now.
just say it was an oversight?
Well, that wouldn't matter, because it's still a question of notice to the voters. But, so my thought is, if you feel that way, and it sounds like you do, let's put it in, and we'll have a conversation with the moderator.
Fiscal office.
Well, it's going to be his call, but,
I know, well, in that case, we'll pull it.
well, I think it could just be added in the fall. I mean, it's not like there's a
No,
fiscal
there
proposal.
are other reasons why it has to be in
But
there.
there are times where someone proposes an amendment to
Right.
do something, and it could be done that way,
But in each instance, though,
or an amendment to it. You know.
but the inquiry is always there. Is it within the scope of the warrant article? Whether it's an amendment from the floor, whether it's proposed afresh. I mean, anyway.
Does it give people time enough to prepare for what's being proposed? Is that the idea?
Yeah, or somebody, one of the tests that we say in the office is, gee, somebody sat at home and looked at this and said, no, I don't care. That doesn't affect me. And then they find out the next day, oh, guess what? It got passed and includes Residence District D, and they live in Residence District D. You're kidding. I would have shown up and I would have
Yeah.
been incensed if I'd known it was in Residence District D. I mean, the reality is, well, I don't know.
Well, by limiting it to public,
It's just
not-
one site.
Yeah, it's not affecting very many people.
The only
Well,
site
that's
is the
the point.
fiscal
Yeah.
office.
All right, anyway, we'll put it in.
No, I mean, it's public
Public.
property in the D district is
Yeah.
only one.
There's
Yeah.
only one. All right, well, that's it. So we'll go in and we'll have the conversation with the moderator.
Public property and any of the other residential districts.
Yeah, there probably are some you're just not aware of because
There's the,
they're not
there's
together.
the concrete fire station.
So I take it we're leaving it at 2/3, 3/3 vote of town meeting.
You guys are okay with that? Okay.
Unless for some reason you want it to pass easier, but I understand your.
I want it to be hard.
It should,
Yeah.
should be something a super majority.
Yeah, I want it to be hard.
Yeah, we got
I
it.
agree.
And then the only other change is we're going to move this to section 3, we'll fit in the permitted use. This whole paragraph is down in section 3. That was Al's suggestion, and frankly, we looked at it and we thought that okay, so move on to purpose and qualifications. Now, the first topic I have for discussion is 2B, had been determined to be historically significant, and so our comment it needs a definition. And Al added, by the process stipulated in the demolition delay bylaw, all these structures require demolition of some kind of uses. In response to our question, how? Well, they wouldn't necessarily, and so for instance, I don't know that the library
Yes,
would demolitions involved there.
quite a bit. They're taking out parts of the mason, of the brick mason wall. They're,
Exterior wall?
yeah,
Okay.
What about the fiscal office, since it's already been?
it's already been done.
Right, so there wouldn't be any.
So that's already been declared significant. So
Oh,
actually, so is the
sorry.
library.
Well, here's the thing, here's my thought. It's just to put some language in here, because I don't think, I don't think we want to rely on some external like demolition delay process, which could take some period of time. One possibility, if I'm crazy about it, one possibility is to write in here the process whereby the historical commission would be asked within 14 or 21 days to determine whether or not the structure is historically significant. using the criteria in the demolition delay bylaw. So it's a kind of finite review. And the other possibility is to leave it to the planning board's determination, and we could import the criteria from the demolition delay bylaw.
We're having a commission to determine whether a building is historically significant. That's really their job. But what you just described,
Yeah.
what you just described was actually the demolition delay historically significant process.
It is, but I'm collapsing it to a 2 or 3 week period rather than.
It already is.
Well,
It's a
there's several
two-step
steps.
process.
Yeah,
The
no.
first step is the determination of significance. I think it's within 14 or 21. So
It is that first step. Yeah.
14 days after the demolition application is received, the commission has to determine whether it's significant or not.
Well, that's my point. But it's just that step. It's not the whole bylaw.
It doesn't say the whole bylaw, it's just the
Well,
process.
Right. Well, okay. Well, maybe I mistook your.
No, it's not the whole demolition delay, it's just
Yeah.
that, it's the
Defining
step
it.
of declaring it historically significant.
Now, the other thing we could do is to have that be a fallback and be able to rely on an earlier determination. So a structure that has been found to be historically significant by the historical commission. Or
Sure.
if not, then
Yeah.
invoke the process.
Yeah.
So has.
And that's really what you would say, have been determined to be historically significant.
At the time of.
Right, I guess just, I want
Yeah,
to be
just to
more
clarify,
specific.
yeah. That's good.
And since we're dealing with publicly owned properties, it isn't likely that we would deem it as not being significant. I'm thinking about the train station on Church Street or the old train station building. I don't know if that has been or hasn't, but if we're dealing with only public properties, aren't we already sort of reducing down to a finite number those properties? And if something wasn't significant, wouldn't that then be a benefit of using the bylaw to renovate and fix it up for reuse?
I'm sorry, hang on, look at me. If you could talk.
So like the case, the school administrative building, is that what you're thinking?
I was thinking more the train station at the abandoned church. If a building that's publicly owned was not deemed to be significant, wouldn't this bylaw be a tool to permit the redevelopment because the criteria, at least one principal structure meets all of the following criteria. So it could be publicly owned, not had a residence, be constructed prior to 1945, but if it was determined not to be significant,
Yeah.
Then it couldn't, it wouldn't qualify.
Wouldn't qualify.
but wouldn't it be in the town's interest to take a historically insignificant building?
What about?
Well, if it was public, if it was owned by the town.
Well, I'm thinking of the fire station on South Avenue. I don't see anybody, if that ever came up, I don't see people would just go to the mat just to save that one. I think that was built before 1945.
You're saying it's historically insignificant?
Yeah. This is to preserve historically important buildings. I mean, that's the whole point.
All right, so what I would do is, it's a bit of a mouthful, but has been found to be historically significant by the Weston Historical Commission, period. If the property has not yet been the subject of a Weston Historical Commission determination, the property will be referred to the Historical Commission to make such a determination pursuant to the bylaw. section numbered, section on procedure, subsection 3, obviously phrased better, which says, just one paragraph, within 21 business days of its receipt of a copy of an application for demolition permit, the Commission shall make an initial determination as to the significance of the subject building. The initial determination shall be positive if the building or portion thereof meets one or more of the criteria A through D of the above definition of significant building.
Yeah, but then you have to include A through D.
Well, it's incorporated here. In other words,
Then can't you just refer to it?
Yeah, why do we have to actually reprint the?
no,
Oh.
we're not going to reprint it. No, I'm just going to refer to it.
Oh,
okay.
And then, yeah. Okay. So procedure, paragraph 3.
So all of these should start with has instead of have.
So has, let's see.
Must have been constructed. No, it's past tense, must involve at least in it meets all. I guess, yeah, that's a change in the language. Must have.
Have been, I did say has in this.
Yeah.
Have been found in the application. Have been found to be historic.
Why is it below? We're talking about property. The property must involve at least one.
Oh, have rather than has. I see those past tense.
Yeah, the sentence changed. Have used to be right, now has is right.
Structures, why see that plurals?
Oh,
When we changed it to property,
Property
must
must,
involve at least one principal structure
it must have been,
that meets, so the structure that meets the following criteria.
I think the implied beginning
It
is,
works
it
either
must
way.
have been. It must,
It
all
works
right,
either way.
whatever.
We do want to be consistent. Okay. So, okay. We did some wordsmithing here on C.
Property owner is the public entity.
Right, yes,
Okay.
at the time of application. What C gets at is, so rather than how we've written it, that it already have a preservation restriction in place, and
That'll be it's a real precondition.
well, in some instances, they may already exist, but
They
where
do.
they don't,
They're in process right now.
yeah, but my point is that, as we know, to get it approved is a long and arduous road. So we're simply looking for the form that we, Kopelman Page, know to be an approvable form, and get the prospective buyers to sign off on it. And we just don't want to hold the whole thing up while we wait. So the next number of months.
It wants to be.
Historic.
It's got to be. No. I mean, we.
And remember,
again,
you're just talking here about the criteria for eligibility, and
Yeah.
What we're saying is, let's have it in place, and it's got to go to town meeting, it's got to then go through a special permit process. If you require that you have the preservation restriction in hand, let's say, of course, by town meeting, it will unnecessarily eliminate an eligible project.
it's a precondition for, well, at least the draft language.
Well, that's what I'm saying. More than
Okay.
draft. I'm saying something that's in a form that is suitable for approval by MHC and signed by the owners or prospective owners. So yeah, it'll
Okay.
be more than a
I
draft.
guess that'll.
And that's why you have proposed developer and any mortgagees in there?
Yes. Yeah, the mortgagee language is. I mean, we're still mulling, frankly, because. Anyway, just a consideration. So the D,
This is the discourage, you know, the guy who wants to basically propose his acre, you know, and try to work out a deal, or the town buys it and, you know, turns over into something else, and, you know, it just cuts that off and says, none of the buildings that are under consideration or that we can think of that we've mentioned have ever been used as a residence for at least 30 years that I
well,
know of.
so we just flagged it again. We don't have a policy, but just from looking at this in terms of practicality, it seems unduly restrictive. Explain what your thinking is, because it eliminates an enormous number of potential buildings, I would think.
I don't want an enormous number of
It
potential.
eliminates the train station
Why?
because it has been used as a residence recently.
Really?
Yeah. Someone's been living there on and off.
The train station that's off Church Street?
Yeah.
Not the one,
Yeah.
not the one by Kendall Green.
That's what I
Bill Levitt lives in the, no, he lives in the multi-unit building up the hill.
But I've seen lights on in the place. I mean,
Yeah.
Someone's living has.
Is it
lived there.
legal?
I don't know. I know that somebody who didn't have title to it tried to sell it at one point, and they called the
I think
office.
it was illegal occupancy.
But the other thing is, if it's only public property, I don't think you need that, because if you were allowing private, yes. But what's an example of a publicly owned property that's a residence?
Well, affordable housing. That's an example. I don't know if it falls into that criteria.
Some donates, wants to.
I can think of some other examples too that might be coming up pretty soon.
Who owns that house for the other? It's an active train station. Is that?
Oh, that is privately owned. I think. Maybe it's a
No,
maybe
it's
a
private.
long. Maybe is it a long lease?
It's private. I'm pretty sure it's private.
I've heard it both ways. I've heard it's a long lease, and I've heard it's privately owned. I don't know.
They paid a sum of money for it, but maybe they did that for a long-term lease. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Personally, I feel more comfortable with it.
And then E.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not going to do it again.
All right, so we heard you.
Yep. Thank you. What about the ROFR? The sunset date on the RFO. That's in paragraph 8.
Further on, yeah. Yeah, so there is the 50-year sunset issue.
I mean, maybe it's not important to people. I just thought,
Right of first refusal.
yeah.
That seems important.
I mean, is there another way to do it? If there's a sunset on the standard route?
Well, let's look at that. But my thought is this, that the project will go through the special permit process through the planning board. The planning board independently can impose conditions. And so the planning board could impose a condition that would, if you will, and now think out loud here, what it would be, but would essentially mirror the right of first refusal, but it wouldn't be that. And there is case law that says that a planning board condition is different from the real estate restriction, so it doesn't have the expiring characteristics that some real estate restrictions have. So that may be the other way to do it.
Could you could K&P send us a draft condition of what you have in mind? I mean, that would work for me, as long as there was some mechanism to do it.
Yeah. Suppose special permit to require that. Of course, you know, the right of first refusal, so it's triggered upon what? So let's just take the library with 3 condominium units. So the town really doesn't want a right of first refusal on the turnover of every condominium.
It
Right?
might.
So really to buy a residential unit. I mean, wouldn't it be on a proposal to change it? And of course, if there's a proposal to change, it's going to come back to the planning board and possibly the town meeting. The library, for instance, wouldn't go.
Well, let's talk about the library.
So-
The library is going to be the current proposal, if it goes through, would have the library be 3 residential units. The northerly unit would incorporate the reading room and the entry foyer as a residence. But, you know, there's been quite a bit of back and forth about preserving that room, and then the town's not being able to have access to it. But what if it were sold as a residence and then came on the market and the town decided that it wanted to buy it for some reason because of the historical value of that space and reuse it for its own purposes? Then that's one of the things I was thinking of with respect to the right of first refusal for part of a building like the library. It might not want the 2 southerly units, but it might want to buy back the reading room unit if it went on the market and sold as a residence.
Well, you wonder if the people who purchase the other 2 units are going to want to be neighbors to this very public use.
Or the person who buys the reading room unit would want it, that sort of, I mean, how would that work? Like they'd have to offer to the town first before they could, for the amount that they would get for it.
Yeah, it had to be a fair market value.
Yeah.
But another example, the program's not nailed down on the tavern, so this is really speculative. But if the tavern were not a bed and breakfast, if the tavern itself were a single-family residence, which is the way I think Cameron is leaning right now, the town might want to buy that one later for public use. So there again, it would be buying part of the complex, buying one condo of 4. Those are the sorts of thoughts I was having. It might not. It might want to buy the barn back, 50, 30 years from now.
So that's all by way of answering my question. We want it to be triggered every time there's a sale of a unit.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. The town can always say no.
And in most cases, presumably that would be the case.
Yeah.
That it would be no. But in rare cases, that at least there'd be the option.
Right.
Yeah.
Real estate peers think of that. Okay.
Skipping down to uses.
Is there any reason that we would want there to be more than 3 units in the sense that, more than 5 units and then some other building could come up? Or we would be restricting ourselves?
Where are you, Steve?
B, 3, and 4. 3, we're limiting it to 3 units of residences and no more than 3 guest suites.
Yeah.
Like if some
We could, I think, then
I don't know.
my suggestion would be change the bylaw.
Change the bylaw.
Yeah, I don't want to have lots and lots of units as an option.
Okay.
Again, the whole idea is to try to keep
Yeah.
people, oh, I can put 5, you know.
Right.
But if you have 4, then one can be, as a 40B, one could be
Yeah.
affordable.
We could,
Or
you're
medium.
saying the multi-use part, make that 4 units as opposed to 3?
It is kind of a magic 40B number.
Yeah, it's the, yeah, DHCD doesn't like units, that's typically that small. But I recognize that there's a conversation out there that talks about 4 units in the library, so we could bump that up to 4 to make that feasible.
The bed and breakfast limiting it at 3 guest suites?
That's all that they're showing. And by the way, what is a bed and breakfast?
Yeah, we can forward a definition. I mean, I think, when you see it, it's
I know. I tried to define it. I didn't get very far.
So you think we should say 4 units for
Yeah.
multi-unit?
Yeah, because you want to leave the door open for, there's a whole group of people that are proposing 4 units in the library.
Well, again, why limit the bed and breakfast to 3 in terms of sustainability and viability if someone's going that route?
Because this is what's in front of us now. If somebody wants to come back with a bigger one, then we can change the bylaw.
But if the Josiah Smith Tavern became residential units, then presumably it could be 4. Is that what you're saying?
No. You couldn't get 4 in there. You couldn't even get 3 in there.
Not with the barn? Is-
Oh, well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it turns into a bigger function, I think the town's going to want to decide. So
And this would be a way they'd come back.
they have to come back.
The town's going to be deciding anyway. I mean, this is
Not once this is
not a by right thing.
Not once this has gone
Goes
through.
to town meeting first, and then special
Yeah.
permit.
So, I mean, if someone wanted to do a bed and breakfast in the tavern, I mean, you can certainly get,
Cameron's already proposing it
well, yeah, but
for three guest suites.
I understand that,
Amazing
but-
coincidence.
somebody may feel they could do more than 3.
Yeah. And I'm saying, if that's the case and they want to come back with a bigger proposal, let's throw that at town meeting as a change in the
But it all comes to
bylaw.
town meeting anyway.
No, I feel strongly, I'd like to limit that. Really limit that. That's my feeling, I don't know, other people might disagree with me. We have a proposal for 3 now, this enables that to happen. I'm sick of playing what if.
Fine, it's a proposal for 3, if that works out, fine, but what if there's a better proposal?
That's
What if that doesn't
You
fall
just said
through?
what if.
What if that falls through? And somebody comes back with something and they need 4 or 5?
I don't know, what if
to
they
be
need
viable?
6,
But wouldn't they be able to just propose a concept plan and the zoning change altogether as
Yes.
a package?
Absolutely,
So,
yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If you want to
I mean,
expand it.
writing this to a specific proposal, I think is, I think it's limiting.
Yeah, it is. That's the whole idea. I don't want,
Is that legal?
It is legal, but Al, I will say, when I came in with an overlay, you didn't like the idea of having something that was so site-specific. And you were thinking more expansively. But again, it's up to you, but it sounds like you're sort of wanting to limit the scope now. The original thought was to have it be something that might have a broader application.
well, I don't happen to think we're going to get inundated with bed and breakfast proposals. I don't think, personally, I'm not sure even this one is going to go through. they typically don't, we're not talking about small increment changes there. And typically, this kind of establishment, at least in this kind of a context, is a lot bigger. And I just don't want to open the door to something that would be a lot bigger without having the town make a positive decision about that. That's all. That's my
I
feeling.
just don't like the idea of writing a bylaw to benefit a specific business.
Well,
I
it's a
think that
use.
that's an issue. And you're saying that that's legal, but.
Right, it's not a legal problem. You can certainly, lots of bylaws have been defined around a specific concept. That's not-
I'm not talking about a specific concept. This is for a
Specific
specific.
proposal, yeah.
This is for a specific business
Yeah, maybe it's specific.
entity. That makes me uncomfortable.
What do you say that you don't want it to be for bed
No
purpose, or
limit.
you don't want to limit it?
He
to
doesn't want
3?
any limit. It could be
No,
12.
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it should be not designed to meet a specific business proposal as opposed to, a need. And so I think it needs a little more flexibility. Not wide open,
Make it
anything
4.
goes. So I'm just saying, that's what I think.
Would you take 4?
That
Having
make
an
you feel
option
better?
now.
4.5,
Yeah,
yeah.
come on.
Yeah,
Really.
I mean, it just, what makes sense, what could, be there? The tavern, I think, could easily, be a bed and breakfast for, 6 people, 6, bedrooms. And, not be a great impact on
Now,
the
what
town.
makes you say that? I mean,
Just
you
its
feel in your gut,
size,
or-
size and its layout.
But the
It's
current
not that big.
developer thinks it can only be 3,
Only be
because you also
3.
have to have the innkeeper's residence. And in fact.
Is the
do we have to
innkeeper
state
a
that?
reference?
Do we have to state excluding the innkeeper's residence?
Well, this is why it needs a definition.
Yeah.
No, because it says 3 guest suites.
Yes,
Oh, it
suite,
is,
so,
okay.
yeah. It's.
But then it doesn't effectively allow for an innkeeper.
But
That's
it
okay.
it would be in the definition. I mean, you've got to define it.
Well, let's move on, I don't want to, hold things
So
up.
let's say
I need a
4.
number.
4.
Put a number, 4, I mean?
Say 4 for now.
4?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I think the only other issue here is in 8. We raised, by the way, all we did here in this language is just make it more concise. But the one question that remains is in 8, retail business establishment, and we put parens, limit by size, and Al made the point that it's self-limiting. And I think your point, Al, is that the size itself confines.
Number of people, actually.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking about buildings with a finite footprint, and then there's a stipulation on limit of expansion. So I just.
Can we limit it to exclude chains, like Harvard Square doesn't allow Dunkin' Donuts?
That's part of the special permit process. I don't know if you can exclude explicit.
Yeah, it's a whole
businesses.
relatively. Harvard Square does it. It's a fast food bylaw, and it's by
Really?
Harvard Square does, yeah.
Wow.
And it's done. Yeah, that's why when you drive into Harvard Square, there's a stealth Dunkin' Donuts. Have you ever
Yeah, I know where it is.
The Elliott Cafe.
Yeah.
In that Church Street garage,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And one of the special permit conditions, in case you ever want your Dunkin' Donuts in a China cup, is that place has to serve you your coffee in a China cup with saucer.
Remember, we didn't want to have any subways, so.
Well, I know it is an issue.
This is not China with something.
So I don't know if you can put any restrictions, but I just.
Well, that's a whole, they call it formula-based business zoning, and it's, a few towns have San Francisco's had.
I'm just trying to tackle it someplace in here.
But yeah, I think you'll get at it. I mean, these are really small developments, you don't have special conditions.
Well, can we cross out 9, because I wouldn't want a bank or other financial institution only because it seems like every time there's a vacant retail space anywhere, a bank comes in and it's kind of the last thing you want. So can we just either not say it or exclude it?
Is it part of?
Is it part of it?
No.
No.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Actually, that was targeted at the fiscal law office. So, because it's in a residential zone, the bank wouldn't be allowed it.
Would a venture capital firm be like a,
Yeah,
That'd
actually,
be an office use.
Yeah.
yeah, it's an office use in the.
They only dispense funds in big numbers.
But in the Josiah Smith Tavern zone, in the library zone, it's a business zone. So a bank is a by right use. So and the underlying by right uses are included in here. So it's only for the fiscal office, and I don't care if it's not a bank in the fiscal office. So.
Or does a retail business automatically include a bank anyway?
It's okay with me, we can take it out if it's.
Anyone else?
Doesn't bother me, get rid of it.
Yeah, plenty of banks.
I thought it sort of stood out there, quite different from all the other things that are written here, so.
It's a low impact case, but I think they're absorbing.
Does
all
this
these
town
pieces
really
of
need
rubbish.
another bank?
Enhance it.
I say cross it out.
You know?
And then how'd you come up again, just to ask, how'd you come up with 16 seats minimum for a restaurant?
I was trying to think about a little place like Theo's, you know, and you know, there might be a call at some point for us in one of these little buildings for a little restaurant, but not a diner. You know what I'm thinking? So I was just trying to get to a size that was still viable, but so small that it would be almost like a, I don't know, like some of the little places in the town center, you know, where you
Yeah.
go for lunch, that kind of thing.
Is Theo's 16 seats?
No, but they're the one
Yeah,
down.
they're
Off center.
Off center.
Yeah, off center. Yeah,
Yeah.
off center is 16 seats.
Right.
That's size
Yeah,
operation.
Right, that's good. And on the next one, can't we just say nonprofit corporation for any civic, benevolent, artistic, or charitable purposes, period? Why do we have to say all that other stuff? Forget the including.
I was trying to rope in the society and
I know,
Community.
they're nonprofits, they're for civic, benevolent purposes.
I think we were actually reading Al's mind a little bit, being sure to include the organizations that are intended.
I just don't know.
No,
If you think
it's
it
not-
is,
no, it's unnecessary.
I mean, would not saying that exclude them?
No,
So-
no, if we, including but not limited to.
Right.
opens-
I mean, you don't necessarily want to make it sound like it was really specific for. I mean, yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
the bed and breakfast. Huh?
Right. That's just a thought.
Yeah.
All right, and some of the language I think we just pulled from the language of
Yeah.
charitable corporations under state law. So the thing is, what nonprofit corporation for any civic, benevolent, artistic, or charitable purposes, period?
Yeah.
Seems like that covers
I
it.
think so.
Right.
Al, did you have something specific in mind by non-commercial art gallery?
No. That was actually out of the existing zoning bylaw.
Okay.
And this would actually allow a for-profit art gallery. There's no reason, because that's a retail business. There's no reason we didn't have that.
But it wouldn't allow a nonprofit one?
No, this is
No, it would.
11 saying
Both
that
are fine.
specifically. Yeah.
Well, but we're taking that out, yes?
No, it's still artistic, but it's still up here.
Artistic and charitable purposes, which you're saying would incorporate a non-commercial art gallery.
Well, only if they're run by a nonprofit corporation. Who else would run
Why would we need to limit an art gallery concept?
It doesn't.
I don't think they
A
do.
for-profit art gallery is a retail business.
it? And you do have the shop or studio of an artist, potter, sculptor, silversmith.
I think we've got it covered.
Okay.
All right, now we get into what is significant.
Yeah, right. So,
How many times have we gone around the block on that one?
So let's just see, what we're talking about is what trips the threshold that sends it back to town meeting for a revised concept plan. So that's the issue. Number 4 is,
I guess I was coming from the perspective that not very much should send it back to town meeting.
well, and I think that's the philosophical point we discussed here. You want a hair trigger on this, so to speak, or you want there to be some leeway. I think, and again, not trying to get into policy, just as a practical matter, you don't want the slightest change to this project, whatever it might be, you don't want to hamstring the people running the project, the occupants, and having to go back to town meeting for a 2/3 vote because of a slight change. Of course, slight change
What
or
is
not
slight?
is exactly is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, that's the problem.
Well,
That's
is that
that's
up to
where
the
you get
planning
in-
board to
No,
decide?
it isn't.
No.
Because now you get into the fight with the property owners, because they will be the owners at that time, as to what the meaning of the word slight or significant is. I mean,
Or any, I mean, or not any, but.
any means any.
Well, that's just it. I mean, so you've got a restaurant, it's quite high quality, and it's continental, let's say, covering whatever, and it's, $25 to $35 an entree kind of restaurant. It's failing a little bit. No, so it's failing a little bit. So a reasonably high end, and instead of continental across the board, a little bit of French, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Italian, you've got a strictly Italian place coming in, and instead of entrees of 25 to 35, they've got pasta dishes starting at $11, and so it's still a restaurant, still white tablecloth, still fine dining, but it's just kind of a notch down, certainly a big notch down in prices. Probably still perfectly good food, but now it's arguably might look a little bit more like an everyday Italian restaurant or other cuisine.
The town needs to decide.
The town needs to decide that change.
Yep. Absolutely, especially with the change. Right.
Well-
And it could very well be. I mean, who's to determine? It could be. Let's say it's right now the restaurant that's being proposed there is Il Casale, Marlow is high-end Northern Italian, very well presented, very well prepared. Another kind of an Italian restaurant would be Pizzeria Uno. Pizzeria Uno would take offense if you said it wasn't fine dining. I'm sure they believe that it really is, and I have nothing against Pizzeria Uno. I mean, I don't want to allow letters about how I hate Pizzeria Uno, but my only point is the town should decide if that's an acceptable change.
You're going from high-end to a chain, right? The Pizzeria Uno must have hundreds, if not thousands of outlets across the country. Again, this is up to you, but I was trying to make a distinction of, within a class of restaurants, if you will, but just dropping down.
Well, how do you define that? Again, the chain operator is going to say, we're not even that different. We're equally good. It's just that we happen to be part of a chain.
So a restaurant that serves $30 a plate restaurants, and I don't know about the restaurant business, but fitting out a restaurant like that, well, you may know in practice, but I assume is several $100,000 worth of investment to put in that kind of kitchen and so on and so forth, and perhaps 2 or 3 times that, I don't know. Is somebody going to be willing to make that kind of investment if a slight change in restaurateur?
When they switch over, they tend to actually, they don't take the equipment with them.
Right. But
So
I'm saying somebody will have financed that equipment, and are they going to need a 2/3 town meeting vote to bring in a new restaurant in 5 years?
I don't care what they want, but what I care is
No,
what
but you
the
want
town
the
gets.
restaurant to go in, is my point.
Well,
You want the investment to be made, and that person is going to look at, gee, these people are pretty exciting, but, they could be gone in 2 years.
How can we control this? I mean,
Well, as
that's-
far as restaurant, I want us to go back to talk about restaurant in a second. Can we do that? Back to number 10 on the previous page, right? So you say, 1680 seats, and add to that with all food prepared on the premises. That will sort of eliminate the kind of chains that bring in their packaged.
Well, what does prepared mean?
Prepared means, you work with raw materials.
But again, a change can say, we prepared the food here, and so some of it happens to come prepackaged.
Well, then we should define that in that fashion. But we're talking about, someone comes and does their chopping and, they work with fresh raw materials.
Fully prepared and cooked.
And
I
that,
don't know, I think there's so many ways around that one.
well, right now, there's nothing really to get around, so.
What about that district that Joel was mentioning that they have in Harvard Square?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, way to
That
do it.
district that you mentioned in Harvard Square?
Oh, fast food. Well, that's just meant to limit the true fast food places.
It can be more broadly defined or something.
Well, they're defined, but
You have the word
what it's trying to get at
gourmet
is
in
litter
restaurant.
and, places that everything is dispensed in a bag with plastic cups and wrappers. So you just see trails of all over the square. So, I mean, it's definitely a different type of restaurant.
I mean, I think this is one of the things that people don't appreciate about the difference between this proposal and the last one. But the last one, the town kept control because the town kept the buildings. In this case, it's all going out the door, so it's going to be owned no longer by somebody else. And so the question is, how can the town do that and still try to maintain the level of quality that people have in mind when they picture this proposal? Or does it even matter? I mean, I'm assuming that it does matter, but maybe people don't care if it's I don't know. I don't know.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a portion of the population that say, oh, we don't have to go all the way up to Winter Street.
But there's a span. What I'm saying is there's a span between the quite high-end restaurant and the pizzeria Uno. And
Well, let's say it's a Bertucci's.
let's say
Is that somewhere higher than
No, that's
or-
pizzeria Uno, let's just say. What I'm saying is between a chain restaurant and by the way, some of these chefs, now have 6 or 8 or whatever restaurants. They're not chains, but they're all now executive chefs.
Yeah.
Don't cook in any of their kitchens, but they're chefs nonetheless.
How do you feel about paparazzi?
Well, let me frame it differently.
Yeah,
The way I see it is that it's change of use in the sense that the turnover at places like that is much greater. So the impact from a traffic standpoint is much greater than a high-end restaurant where it's a much slower turnover. So it seems to me that that's something that should be considered at town level. June.
Sounds like we're setting a minimum entree price.
Which I
De
don't
facto,
think we should
maybe.
do.
Maybe.
I mean, it shouldn't have to be
Yes.
high end.
I agree. It's the concept of sitting down
Right.
for a meal that
Right.
takes more than a half an hour.
There is, I honestly think there is a little bit of a, I think the image that people have is that this is going to be a pleasant place where you can get really good food, intimate, a fairly intimate place that doesn't charge a lot of money. And I really think that's the image, and I think the reality is going to be that it's going to be an intimate place that serves really good food, where you're going to have to pay some money to eat there. I mean, I just think that's the reality. And it's at this point, I don't think that people's understanding of the restaurant is gelled enough to give me enough feedback to know how much to pull the reins in.
Yeah, you see, and I think the conversation illustrates the difficulty of, you're saying people have even defined it in their minds, and we're trying to reduce it to writing in the zoning bylaw. I don't think it can be done. And again, so the question is,
We're going to,
in terms of a
we're gonna want
threshold
assurance.
for sending them back to town meeting, where do you want to set that threshold? And again, you know,
If the restaurant changes hands, I think town meeting's going to want to see it. That's my feeling. And then it gets to decide if it's okay. Now, that's where I wound up.
It'd be a quick vote.
Yeah. We could lower the standard to majority vote on the re-concept plan, as opposed to
Not a bad
two-thirds.
idea. Just say any change with a majority vote.
Changes in use.
Let's leave it like that, so we're not accused of menu tampering. I want to note that for about an hour and a half, we've gotten 2 pages. We have 8 more pages.
yeah, but the
Can we
last
pick up the pace?
7 pages will be easy sailing.
Let's go.
Says you.
No, we front loaded all the hard work.
Good. Let us get on with this. I think we have some other things on our agenda.
No.
Other
There's only
business.
one other.
It's just very quick things I just wanted input from the board on.
Okay, well, let's try to get this done.
Okay, but the bad news is, Dave, we're backtracking.
I'm sorry, I take full responsibility.
No, you're not. No, before you make a comment, your colleagues, were you serious about looking back to the quantum of vote? Just look at the language here about changes.
We're just going to say any changes, right?
That's number 4 on page 2, I think.
So cross out significant. But we're going to change it to
Type it.
majority rather than 2/3.
Oh, and then I can vote later. All right, so we'll.
Yeah, we're just changing, we're just saying the
I see.
revised
It's right
concept
here.
is
It's right
majority.
here. Yeah, it's right here. So what wording are we going with? Just the original language, any changes in
Use,
use,
Service
comma,
requirements.
The type or nature is fine. Because doesn't a change of use mean from restaurant to something else? It doesn't necessarily mean from one restaurant to another restaurant. So
Right.
you may need to say the type or nature.
well, it does say restaurant or restaurant
Right.
operation.
Look, change of use, occupancy, and operations, that's pretty broad.
I'm just looking at the original language.
Oh,
Use,
I'm looking
service
at the-
requirements and retail or restaurant operation, or any increase in the number of occupants and parking demand shall be subject to approval. Revised concept plan by,
Yeah.
you want to say majority vote?
Yes.
Town
Instead of
meetings.
2/3.
So we're good with the original language, except we're putting in majority instead of 2/3.
All right, so the original said any and all changes in use,
I
right?
just say any.
Any and all.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine.
Changes in use, type of occupancy, service requirements, and method or style of, you still want that in there? Method or style of a retail or restaurant operation, see that?
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by method.
Well,
Sure.
No, I think we can leave that part out. It's crossed out, and I think that's fine.
Okay.
Service requirements and retail or restaurant.
Yeah, because you're just changing it. If you change the store, the restaurant,
All right, so let me show you
it's
that.
subject to town meeting.
So we're getting rid of any significant. So it's going to say any change. Are we keeping in the type or nature?
type or nature, yes.
Okay,
We can keep that in, then we can take out the style and method.
okay. And
It's the same, it comes to the same thing.
we're keeping in type of occupancy?
Yeah.
Took that out because that wasn't.
Yeah, because that could, what happens if it changes from single-family residence, then the tavern starts as a residence and changes to bed and breakfast, what happens?
All right. That's a change of use.
Type of occupancy too, it could be less. It could be a lower occupancy, but it could be greater.
It's still a change of use, so it comes up every
Well, type of occupancy would be, they're both, strictly speaking, residential, kinds of residential.
Okay, so we got any changes in the type or nature of use, the type of occupancy, service requirements, and we're keeping method or style of?
No, we're deleting that.
Deleting method, okay. And style of?
No.
Deleting that.
Oh, okay, okay. And retail or restaurant operation,
Yeah.
and any material increase?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, yeah. Material increase in the number of occupants, parking lots, be subject to bylaws, concept plan by a majority vote of town meeting. Okay.
Another example of type of occupancy, David, what if it goes from condos to apartments?
Yeah.
It's the same use.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll have different service requirements and,
But it's a different type of
In
occupancy.
any case, we're fine.
We got it.
So move right on.
Yeah, that would-
Concept.
So we're getting rid of the comparison, essentially.
Yes, yeah, the comparison.
Yeah.
By the way, this word has to be put back in.
Oh, I noticed that. Yes, thank you. I did, I proposed things.
Anyone have any comments on this?
My only question is, the submission requirements for the concept plan shall be specified in rules and regulations to be adopted by planning board. That will be separate from this, right?
Just like the art.
Because also in this, and later on, there's site plan approval, special permit submission. No. Site plan approval, special permit rules and regulations that will be adopted. Is the concept plan kind of in the same category? It's,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's.
Right. Just use the art model, because we've already done it.
Okay.
So you want to take out the language that sort of sets the standard for the design guidelines and standards?
Well, it seemed that it had been, I'm not sure you're referring to one paragraph we just moved to the top.
No, this,
I'm sorry, which?
I'm on the bottom of page 3 of 10. Maybe I'm in a different place from you.
Development shall be sensitive to and so forth? That deletion?
No, the HP is,
Well, yeah, it depends which copy.
Last one there.
By
the last
law,
paragraph
it
of 3, HSPD bylaw provides some design flexibility in order to encourage blah, blah, blah. You take that out, that's,
Oh, I see.
oh, you're in a different place.
No, it's just, mine, it's on a different page. The HSPD bylaw provides some,
That was just meant to sort of, again, that came right out of the yard. It was just meant to establish the general umbrella under which these guidelines and standards were being promulgated.
oh, you know what the thought is here, and it could go back in, but one of the big differences between the yard and this is that we're not working with the land so much, we're working with buildings. And I mean, I know there's landscaping and we've addressed it in some places, but I mean, art you're talking about, was it a 40-acre minimum?
It was a big site. Yeah, this is a smaller scale, but it's still, all right.
But you do cover that.
It is
Yeah.
covered in other
Well,
places. So that was the
maybe
thinking
the
behind it.
language is wrong, but is there some overarching
Well,
reason why we're applying these guidelines and standards? I think that's more my question. What do we hope to get from applying these? And I think what we hope to get is a more sensitive project, a project that's more compatible with its surroundings and people's perception of town character. I don't know if that's something that we need to say, or if that's just implied when we start listing these guidelines and standards.
Well, you know what, maybe we can work on, I'm going back to the very first paragraph, because the real purpose is to reuse historic structures. But then maybe we add a sentence at the end of this very first paragraph saying something like, in addition, without necessarily using the phrase, in addition, the sites shall be developed in a manner that is
Consistent with.
right, talking about
Sure, that
the
works.
landscape and the context.
That's fine.
But I think the main focus is the buildings rather than.
Well, yeah, I mean,
But
I
then-
just took that right out of the yard. I agree, it's
Yeah.
not strictly altogether applicable, but I'm just, at least in my experience, it's helpful to have that kind of overview statement to plug your comments into when you're going through the guidelines and standards. Because otherwise you get the question, why are we doing this, and anyway.
Okay. On page 4, but in that paragraph 2, design section,
Site design.
relationship to neighboring properties, how you have a comment here.
Yeah, it's not so much that you're,
There are circumstances where views into the property should be mitigated with screening and so
Mhm.
forth. So I thought where we addressed it, but see what you think. If you go down into section 3,
landscape design.
this last paragraph, effective vegetative buffers and site boundaries shall be established to screen the HSPD from adjacent properties and roadways to the extent necessary as determined by the planning board. In cases where topography renders, actually it's mostly your language, renders further buffers and effective additional screening plantings in the interior of the tract would require. I think that hits it.
Okay.
Right, I think.
Okay.
But I think I agree with Al that that second sentence in the first paragraph under landscape design should be kept in.
Which is,
Landscape design for the HSPD shall reflect the desire of Weston.
For sure. So that's the first
Oh,
paragraph.
okay.
I think that needs to be
To be a
kept in.
purpose statement.
yeah. Okay, so here's the specific thought. So maybe we just rework it by avoiding formal manicured landscape treatments. So again, if you have a property which is, I don't know, say 30, 40, 50% built, they won't necessarily be formal manicured, but you're no longer working with the natural setting, if you will. I mean, in other words, when you talk about preserving the town's rural character, well, the two buildings we're talking about, we're talking about the Weston downtown, if you will, not the town's rural character.
No, but the library, maybe that's true, because it's on a very limited site.
Yeah.
The tavern is on a big site that runs all the way to Route 20.
The back of it, but I
Well,
mean,
that's part of the site.
yes, it is. Yeah, well, true enough. I guess I was more
And the same
focused
thing
on
with the
street
fiscal law
front.
office. That site goes all the way to Route 20. I mean, now, it's not being used right now, and it's probably never going to be sold, so it made it be a totally irrelevant example, but I just want to be sure that, in general, people understand that you're not going to have, at least expect to have, acres of rolling lawn.
Sure.
We're talking about a condo
I don't think it does
association.
any harm.
Well, I just thought it seemed incongruous. It seemed like nobody's talking. There isn't land enough. Now, I hadn't thought frankly about the backyard, if you will, of the tavern, but I haven't seen any proposal that discusses touching it.
Well,
Isn't it
not
wet?
yet.
Yeah.
What about, I'm trying to think 25 years from now.
Yeah.
Or it's a different condo association.
But
or-
that would be something that would have to come back to you. I mean,
But, okay.
Isn't it wet there?
What?
Isn't it really wet?
Part of it is, part of it isn't. There are sections that actually aren't wet at all. There's actually an old cart path that runs through it. And those are kind of features that we want to preserve.
all right, so maybe what we'll do.
Part of it could be formal, basically Boston Post Road, but this does not include that.
No, it just,
So so the rural character. I was thinking of the street frontage.
yeah.
And you're talking about the rear. All right, let me think about that.
And you could also, it's insofar as practical again.
Yeah.
To the extent.
All right, let me see.
But I'm sorry to go back, but under site design, the second item, and perhaps this does belong there under landscape design, but I would like it to say, the second item, the development shall be sensitive to the land and take into consideration existing natural resources, including but not limited to the following landforms, woodlands, wetlands, storm pools, significant trees, which we could say caliber greater than or to be selected by the town, because I think trees are a big part of the land and geological features.
Yep, okay.
I don't know if that's the right place for it, or if that should be under landscape. How would you
So maybe,
define significant trees? By the caliper, or do we choose?
oh, I think,
It's because it's subjective. It could be
Yeah.
a huge caliper, but not the tree.
well, you're going to get to see it as a planning board, and I think that's what I want to see.
So just say significant
It's
trees.
just- It doesn't say you have to save all trees, it just says you have to be sensitive.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting, that's in site design. We're talking about landscape design.
That's why I was saying I didn't know if it belonged in landscape. but-
No, that's fine. I mean, there's some overlap.
It was quite possible we could just meld those two paragraphs.
Yeah.
Say it, landscape design.
Site, yeah.
And landscape design.
Landscape design.
Blend them all together.
Yeah.
Because actually the first one under site design, it's really more architecture, but it's not.
parking, I added a word, I just wanted to make sure.
Same zoning district?
Yeah, is that what you had in mind?
That's what I had in mind.
Now,
It's actually, same zoning district, just like.
now I was wondering, since you're writing this now, because we had that discussion about the fact that one side of the street is
Is it a different
and the
zoning
north-
district?
and the north side is residence.
Yeah.
But now, if you're writing this, and you actually want to allow both sides to be considered,
It's a density proof plan. You have to demonstrate that you can satisfy the parking requirements under the standard parking regulations.
so you can't demonstrate it by parking on both sides of
No.
the street in that case?
No, but you could waive it as part of the special permit process. So you don't want to open the door to allowing hundreds of cars anywhere. So it says, it's like a flex development plan. You start with satisfying the zoning regulations, and then if you want to mitigate impacts, let's take St. Julia's for example. You want to mitigate the impacts of parking for the tavern on St. Julia's. You can demonstrate you can park the cars on the site if you want to, or even on the street within the same zoning district by special permit. But you're going to be bumping up against St. Julia's. So this says, in that case, the planning board can consider parking in other zones in order to mitigate, in other words, minimize the parking area on site. That's what it basically says. So we could, right now, by my calculations, if you take the tavern parking alone, we've talked about this in the historical commission, they're showing 20 to 25 car parking lot. I'm guessing, just based on the calculations I did, that based on the program that we're looking at, the community league,
Right.
society, restaurant, and bed and breakfast, that they're going to need somewhere between 50 and 60 cars. In the business zone on street, from the corner of School Street to Center Street, where the turnoff to the Omni is, there are a total of 20 spaces. They're short at least 20 spaces, 15 to 20 spaces. They could actually park them. They could actually make a parking lot big enough to accommodate them on the site. But it would be brutal to St. Julia's. So this says, okay, show that you can actually do that, and then based on impact factors like impacts on St. Julia's, the planning board has the ability to issue a permit based on parking in other zones. So we can release that stranglehold from the standard parking regulations.
You're saying that they need to show first that they can build a parking lot for 40 cars?
No.
This is like a flexible.
Like a flexible subdivision plan.
I don't know.
You don't know how that works.
But it does read, I think, Steve, as you're describing it, reads to say first you have to show that you can accommodate it on site.
On site or with a special permit on street.
Yes.
And then we can back off of that and let you park in places where you wouldn't commonly be able to park, like across the street in a residential zone.
Do we have to say that?
Yeah.
No, do we have to say that in that second paragraph that you would be allowed, if we waive it, that you would be allowed to park in an adjacent?
Well, it says you got to present a parking plan.
Yes, you're just waiving, it doesn't, once you waive, basically they can come in with any plan and you determine whether or not that plan's adequate.
Right.
But you don't put limitations on what the alternate plan can be.
We consider business A and B as different districts, though, wouldn't we?
Yes, I'm a little concerned, yeah, do you mind pointing that out?
The